Greetings! In this video, you're going to get a crash course on crochet hooks and yarn, how they're used, and what you should know about them before you get started. If you're new to this channel, my name is Stitch, and Patchwork Productionz is all about learning and doing crochet. So make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. Without further ado, let's jump straight into this. Crochet hooks are the fundamental tool used in crochet, and you can't really crochet without a crochet hook. There are some hookless methods, but we won't talk about that now. Now, not all hooks are created equal. They're made of different materials, and which one you pick is primarily for your own comfort or preference. But we'll talk about 3 different materials today. You'll see that these hooks here are what's called anodized aluminum hooks, and these ones here are plastic hooks. Now there are also steel hooks, but those are a little different and I don't have any to show you. If we think of the sizing of these hooks, steel has a different sizing scale and is very small, but we won't worry about that now. This here is a D3 hook, also a 3.25 millimeter. This is an E4 hook, or a 3.5 millimeter. This one's an F5, this one's a G6, this one's a... And you can see that these letter type names are associated with a millimeter sizing. The plastic hooks follow the same sizing. Now, these aren't the only sizings that we have in crochet. You'll notice that there's also a size 0, B1, C2, L11 or 8 millimeter, P16 or 11.5 millimeter, and even this Q16, massive guy. Now there's also this guy here, odd one, but it's called an Afghan hook. It's primarily used in things like blankets or Tunisian crochet, although it can be used for anything, and it's a size I9. Now if we look on the hooks, we'll notice that the hooks tell us what size they are. So whenever in doubt, just look at your hook and you'll be able to see that the size is written right on the finger hold. These are just a few examples. Now let's talk about the basic anatomy of a crochet hook. We'll see that here, this is the hook. Here, this is the throat. This here is the work area. Now, on a smaller hook, you would notice that this is larger, and it's just in between the throat and the finger hold. And the finger hold is where the size is written. And then we have the handle. Now, all that you've learned here is basics, and things like the anatomy aren't too important until you start working with the yarn. Also, in relation to the material, the choice of hook that you might get, it doesn't matter whether you pick anodized aluminum or whether you pick plastic. You could do bamboo for all I care. Just, it's all up to your preference, although the steel hooks are for a specific sizing, and so we'll talk about those in another video. Alright, so let's talk about yarn and yarn weight. Now, when we say yarn weight, we don't mean how heavy it is. That's something a little different. So we don't mean the weight as in grams. No, that's not what we mean. We mean how thick the yarn is. This is what we mean by yarn weight. So let me explain. You see here on the label of any roll of yarn that you get, you'll notice that it mentions the weight in ounces and grams, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this little guy over here, which we'll explain. That's the symbol for this weight of yarn, which happens to be Jumbo 7. So the weight scales from 0 to 7, and what we're showing you here is crochet thread. Now, crochet thread is quite unique. It's not quite yarn, and it runs on its own sizing scale, different from regular yarn, although it does include regular size yarning. So we'll see here, this is a size 10, or count 10 crochet thread, and that's a size 3. But on the side here, you'll notice that it mentions weight 0, or waist weight, and weight 1, or super fine. Also, it gives the recommended hook for each of these. And you can see here, this one requires a size 7 steel hook for 1.5 millimeter. And this one over here just uses regular D3 or E4. You can see here this one is a size 2 or fine, and this one's a size 3 or lightweight, and it also gives the recommended hook. This is a size 4 medium or worsted weight. This one is a size 5 or bulky, and this one is a size 6 or super bulky. And again, they all show the recommended hook size. This is our Jumbo 7, and it again shows, size U. So there's something larger than Q. Well, now just to give you an better understanding that this is the sizing that we're talking about, let's line these all up in order of size, and we'll explain their classifications. The yarn under the brackets are all in a certain weight of yarn. And we'll see there here that this is size 0 or lace. Now it's also known as fingering or 10 count crochet thread. This one here is super fine, also known as sock or fingering baby, and it's weight 1. This one here is weight 2, also known as fine, sport, or baby weight. This here is weight 3, also known as lightweight, double knit or DK, and light worsted weight. This here is one of the most common medium weight yarn, also known as worsted, Afghan, or Aran. This weight 5 is known as bulky or chunky. Weight 6 is known as super bulky or super chunky. And weight 7 is known as jumbo. Weight 6 and 7 are also known as roving. So as you can see here, weight, when talking about yarn in this context, is referring to the sizing of the yarn. Now let's talk about something very important, and this is the material of the yarn. This will have many factors on different things that you make with yarn, but we'll talk about the 3 basic categories that we know of for yarn material. Number 1, natural yarns. Number 2, synthetic yarns. And number 3, animal yarns. So in natural yarns, we have cotton, bamboo, linen, and other things, but basically yarn made from plants. Synthetic yarns are like acrylic, polyester, nylon, and plastics or man-made material yarn. Then we have animals, which is like wools, alpaca, silk, and basically any yarn that is made from animals. And so when we consider these different materials, we see different benefits. Natural yarns are really good for clothes, they're good for babies, and cotton especially is good for the home because it can take high heat. Synthetic yarn should take no high heat, but they're useful if you want to avoid allergies with natural stuff, and they're used for most things like acrylic yarn. Animal yarns are not as good for babies, but they're just warm. It's very scratchy if that's a concern for you, and they're typically hand washed. Now, speaking of washing, how do we wash our yarn? The yarn labels, if you buy a new pack of yarn, generally they do tell you how to wash the yarn. So familiarize yourself with the icons on the labels that you know, and also read the instructions before washing it. The label also has other useful information like what material the yarn is and also what its weight is. Now, there are some yarns that have blends of materials. So if you have any allergies or you're going to wash this, be sure to read the label before proceeding. Now, let's talk about ply. There have been a few misunderstandings with ply, and it's a tricky subject, but we can clear things up. Ply is basically how many different strands make up the yarn. So it's not the yarn thickness. Don't mistake this for the yarn's weight. But remember, it's how many strands make up the yarn. Now, ply was once used as a weight, like to how thick the yarn was, but this is very rare to see, and it's not important for beginners. you don't need to worry about this. Now, ply is referred to as 1 ply or 2 ply, 3 ply, 4 ply, etc. And so I'm going to give you a few examples of what this looks like. If you look here, this is some regular weight 4 or worsted weight yarn. And as you look closely, you'll see these little twists in them. If you twist them, you know that you recognize that there are multiple strands that make up this yarn. Now, if we untwist this, we can see those individual strands, and that is the ply. So if we actually go ahead and take apart the ends of this yarn, we can actually count the ply of the yarn. So as I pull this out, you'll see that there are 4 individual strands. And so we would consider this yarn not only a weight 4 and a worsted weight, but also a 4 ply. And you know it's the ply because if you try to pull that apart, it doesn't untwist, it just turns into fuzz. And so this is 4 ply yarn. This is some weight 6 yarn. Now, this is a specialty yarn. You can see these little frilly things in it, and it's fuzzy because it's kind of a wool blend. And so it's going to be a little bit harder, but you can still see the same twists inside this yarn. And so if we were to untwist this as well, we can see its ply. Now, this is a 2 ply yarn, and again, that's fuzzy. And so we know that that is the ply. So this is a 2 ply weight 6 yarn. Now this here is a weight 1 yarn or super fine. And again, we see these twists. And if we go ahead and untwist this yarn, we'll see that there are 3 individual strands in this yarn. And so this weight 1 yarn is a 3 ply yarn. Now this here is our jumbo yarn. And it doesn't appear to have a ply. Because again, this is a specialty yarn. And some yarns, like not all plies are the same. And so, as an example, we have this pom-pom type yarn, which you can see has these little pom-poms mixed into it. And I wouldn't say that this has a ply. It's kind of like just a rope made in its own way. And it's actually a weight 6 super bulky, even though it's so fine, but that's just because how the yarn is worked with. So these are what I call exotic yarns, and so they're handled differently. Here's another example. This is like a fake fur kind of a yarn, and again, it's a weight 6 because of how it's used, even though it's fine. And look, this doesn't quite have a ply. It's like the fibers are bound to this, and so not all yarns that you work with will necessarily have a ply. Here's another example. This is like a yarn that has different loops in it. So you see it's like the loops are bound to a core of the yarn. And so it's a weight 6. It's worked in a different way. Some specialty yarns may not have an exact ply. And that's okay. Sometimes you may hear ply referred to, sometimes you may not. It's not something to stress over. So just remember, ply is basically the number of strands in your yarn. In summary of everything that we've learned today, we learned that about crochet hooks and how they're the primary tool used in crochet. They're made from plastic, aluminum, steel, and other things, and that their sizing, except for steel hooks, is 0 and B through U. We also learned about yarn and how weights is actually how thick they are, and that they're classified from 0 to 7, that crochet set thread is sized differently, and how their materials are natural or plant, synthetic, animal, and blends. We also learned about the label, and how on the label we learn about the washing instructions, recommended hook size, weights or thickness, and how much yarn there is. This is measured in grams, ounces, yards, and meters. And we also learned about the ply and how it's how many strands make up the yarn and not how thick the yarn is in most cases. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this content and learned something, Be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another episode. Also, don't forget to like this video and share this with your friends and families, and also feel free to leave a comment down below. Until next time, catch you later.